go back to the year 1862 for a few moments. 1862, more specifically Monday morning, September 22nd, 1862. Abraham Lincoln had been in office now for a couple of years, and the Civil War had been raging on for about the same amount of time and becoming bloodier with every passing day. Well, Lincoln on this morning sent out word to all members of his cabinet. He wanted to see them for a very special meeting that day, 12 o'clock noon sharp. 12 o'clock noon at his office. Well, shortly before 12 o'clock, all the members of his cabinet filed into his office and sat at their respective places. And Lincoln was already there. He was sitting behind his desk reading a book. And the cabinet members were getting a little restless because, they knew they were all there. Why didn't he start this very important meeting he was talking about? But Lincoln kept right on reading, and pretty soon that minute hand with the clock on the wall went right past the noon hour, and Lincoln kept right on reading. Now the cabinet members were really getting upset and nervous. But finally Lincoln looked up and said, "Oh, this book. This is the funniest book I've read in a long, long time. It's by Artesian Ward, and what a great humorist he is. Oh, listen, let me read a little bit of it to you." And Lincoln started reading to his cabinet members out of that book. Well, now the cabinet members are really getting upset. They're thinking, is this why the president brought us into his office for this important meeting to read to us out of a book? But he kept right on reading. War Secretary Ed Stanton was particularly upset. He wrote about it a little bit later on. He said, when President Lincoln started reading to us out of that book, man, I got so upset, I almost stood up and just walked out of the room. Now, Lincoln kept right on reading until he got to the end of the chapter. And then he let out a great, big, hearty laugh. Cabinet members are all quiet. Complete silence. Not even a courtesy chuckle. Nothing. And Lincoln looked up at them and said, "Oh, why aren't you laughing? This is a very funny book." Silence again. And then Lincoln said, considering the stress I've been under in the last few months, if I didn't have a real good laugh once in a while, I think I would die. And very frankly, I think you folks could use some of that same medicine. So with that, he reached over to his hat. That big, tall, black hat of his was sitting on the corner of his desk upside down. He reached inside the hat and brought out a piece of paper that had some of his writing on it. And he said, here's something I want to read to you. It's the preliminary copy for the Emancipation Proclamation, the document that we've been talking about recent months. I just finished it yesterday after getting home from church, and I want to read it to you now, and I want it to go into law. I want to sign the final document 100 days from today. That'll be January 1st, 1863. And here's what I've written. And he read to them his copy for the preliminary copy of the Emancipation Proclamation. And most of the cabinet members were delighted with it. It's just the kind of a document they've been talking about. It was worded just right. And they were really happy with it. As a matter of fact, War Secretary Ed Stanton was particularly delighted. He stood up and said, Mr. President, if reading that book was a prelude to such an action as this, well, that book ought to go down in the nation's archives. And the author should be canonized. 100 days later, January 1st, 1863. President Lincoln sent for all of his cabinet members once again to come to his office, along with other people. This time it was to witness his signature on the final draft of the Emancipation Proclamation. Everybody crowded around him here on his seat at his desk in his office. They wanted to get the best possible vantage point of the signing of the document because they knew that this was a very, very important historical document. Finally, when they were all settled, Lincoln took the pen in his hand, lifted it up, held it over the document, but then he put it down. He put the pen down without signing it. And then after a while, he picked up the pen again, held it above the document, but he did the same thing. He put it down on the desk again without signing it. Everybody was wondering, what's the matter? Why is the president so hesitant about signing this document? Well, then Lincoln looked up at the people and said, "Oh, folks, maybe I should explain my actions here. You see, this being New Year's Day, there's been a lot of visitors here at our White House, and I tell you, I've been shaking hands so much today, my poor old right hand here is almost paralyzed, or at least it's a little shaky at times. Now, if I sign this document with any shakiness showing in that signature, well, people for many years to come are going to be looking at this document, and when they get down to the end of it, they look at my signature, and they see a little bit of shakiness in my signature, they're going to say, aha, the president was hesitant when he signed this document. Well, I'm not hesitant about signing it. I'm for it with all my heart and soul, and I want my signature to show that firm resolution. So with that, he picked up the pen again, held it above the document, this time in a good, firm, steady hand, brought it down, and signed his signature, his full signature, Abraham Lincoln. Not A. Lincoln, as he signed most documents, but his full signature, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln wrote about that experience a little bit later on. He said, you know, signing that document, the Emancipation Proclamation, was probably the most important action of my entire administration, maybe the most important action of the entire century. If I'm ever known for anything special in future years, it will probably be the signing of this document, the Emancipation Proclamation. It's truly a momentous thing to be part of an action that would set free and give liberty to an entire race. Well, if Lincoln could have only known that on the year when the world would be celebrating the 200th anniversary of his birth, an African American would be inaugurated as President of the United States. And he and his wife and family would be living in the White House. Amazing. And you know, there's some interesting similarities between these two men, these two presidents, Abraham Lincoln and Barack Obama. Both men are, aside from political beliefs, that is, both men are slender and came from Illinois. Both had very humble beginnings. Both have a rather easygoing demeanor with a real good sense of humor. Both wrote their own speeches, or at least had very tight control of the writing of those speeches. Both men encountered exceptional challenges when they first took office as president. Abraham Lincoln had that Civil War to deal with. Obama had a very serious recession on his hands, plus a couple of wars. And both men were not at all hesitant about appointing previous adversaries to their cabinets and in other positions of leadership. Two men, two presidents, with some interesting similarities.